One of the things I should do by starting this talk is say that when I thought about the subject, after I decided on the subject, I realized this is a very large subject, and it's a very complex. So what I'm going to do is try and focus in on one or two major ideas. Within Jewish thinking and Jewish thought, the concept is that there's the whole function of life, or the whole function of existence, and the whole function of creation is meant to be a dialogue between ourselves and God. So one of the most important things that we have to do if we're going to maintain a dialogue or a relationship or an interchange and communication with God is we have to be capable of something that's sort of a two-sided coin, and that is facing ourselves and facing God, which are really two sides of the same coin. One of the main points, I think, is that the first element is that of facing ourselves. For instance, in Jewish thinking, it's impossible to ask God for forgiveness if we've done something wrong to another human being without asking the forgiveness of the other human being first. That we can't bypass the problem to get it solved with God. We have to take care of the problem as best we can at the level of the problem first with the other person or other people, and then when that's rectified or at least neutralized, we can then turn and ask God for forgiveness. In terms of our general relationship with God, it pretty much works the same way. We have to be able to face ourselves in order to be able to face God, because the two are intimately connected. The Jewish view of the soul is that there's three different elements to the soul, which involve different levels of consciousness. One is sort of the Kabbalists refer to as the nefesh, that part of the soul that we're most familiar with. That is our personality, our ego, our presence in the world, how we identify ourselves in life, how we identify ourselves to ourselves, is understood to be the outer level of the soul, and that's the one that we're most familiar with. The second we're familiar with, but not always as conscious of, which is referred to as the ruach. It's the internal part of ourselves that consists of memory, of embedded experience, of the ability to communicate with higher levels of oneself, which is considered a deeper level, but it's a second aspect of our soul. And the third aspect of our soul is the neshama, which, as best I can translate, is our essence. That's our pure being. So there's there's a continuum on one hand, but there's also a certain dichotomy on the other. That is, or polarity is probably a better word for it. On one hand, the soul is the same thing, but has three different dimensions. Our personality and our ego, our internal reality, and then also our pure being. Our pure being is us as eternal souls, as pure light, as divine beings, as a child of God that is immortal, that's eternal, that's infinite, that is the direct spark of God that makes us who we are as an essence. In order to face God, one can face God from probably either position. But the position is different depending on where you are. In other words, one of the biggest problems in facing God is that if we're stuck on the ego level or the persona level, then it becomes difficult to face God because we become too absorbed in ourselves. In other words, if our focus is overly connected with our everyday life, our experience, our wants, our desires, our needs, etc., there's nothing wrong with that unless that's where we're focused primarily, because that interferes with a certain communication with God. We become so focused on our self with a small s, we lose complete track of ourself with a capital S. And that can interfere interfere is the right word, or slow down the process of connect or facing God directly. The other problem, which is related to it, has to do with how we judge ourselves. That if on a conscious level we're carrying around a lot of fear, a lot of guilt, a lot of self-deprecation, a lot of feelings of inadequacy, of what in Kabbalah they refer to as smallness, then if we're overly focused on the smallness, then what happens is the grief, the pain, the anguish, the sadness interferes with our ability to interchange with God. So the one way to approach the problem is through the process of they refer to it in Hebrew as panimiyut, which I'm not sure there's an English word for exactly. But panimiyut means sort of like internalness, being focused on internal reality as opposed to focus on external reality. So one of the things that panimiyut does is it forces us, if we go within ourselves, that we transcend, in a sense, or put on hold our focus on the world and put our focus internally instead, then we're on the road to facing God. And the first major step is facing ourselves first. The same way we have to ask forgiveness from someone else before we can ask forgiveness from God, we have to face ourselves before we can face God as ourselves. So part of the process of facing ourselves is I can put it several different ways. In Jewish tradition, they refer to it as musar, but the 12-step program refers to it as a moral inventory. Is one of the major steps in facing oneself, and that is objectively stepping back and taking a look at your life, a look at your interchange with the world, and a clear look at your behavior patterns. And then, in a sense, coming to terms with both sides of the ledger, so to speak. What exactly have I done right, and what have I done wrong? In Jewish thought in general, and in Hebrew specifically, the word for sin, chet, literally means to miss the mark, like to overshoot a target, or to hit the target but you didn't exactly hit bullseye. The concept is that in life, the major part of life is trial and error. We learn things by experimenting. We do this, we believe that, we try to achieve this, we operate here, we don't operate there. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work. Some of it has very positive effects, and some of it has very detrimental effects. So the first part of panimiyut is introspection, to go back and look at this is what I've experienced in my life, and I can tell you from experience, this is good, this is not so good. This has a positive effect, this one had a detrimental effect, or could be a very damaging or devastating effect. Or, on a more neutral level, this seems to work, and this seems to not work. So, if we can face that, then we have the tools for making conscious corrections in how we handle things. The second level of facing oneself is in a sense, Pnimiyut also encompasses the Eastern concept of tranquility or quiet. In Jewish thought, it really refers to sort of quieting the soul, not just the mind. In Eastern tradition, you have to, well, in Kabbalah too, you have to quiet the mind if you're going to meditate, because otherwise the mind goes off in bizarre directions, or 25 different directions at the same time, and it doesn't get you far enough. But in Jewish thought, they not only encompass that idea, but they connected with the concept of quieting the soul down. And that involves not just introspective work, but a certain degree of internal transcendence. That Pnimiyut means going deep within and reaching that point where you're hitting the void within yourself. By void, I don't mean emptiness. By void, I mean total quiet. That the deeper spiritual realms are accessed through internal quiet. You have to be at peace with yourself before you can delve to higher realms of consciousness. The doorway is that quietude. And that quietude is generally reached by tapping into one's inner sense of being. I don't know how else to put it. That in the tree of life, there's 4 levels. The physical level, then the emotional level, then the mental level, and then the spiritual level. And the spiritual level is sort of a quantum leap, for lack of a better word. And the quantum leap is from shifting one's consciousness to one's consciousness of ego or of self, to one's consciousness of self with a capital S. That is, our pure being, our pure essence, without any other reference.